And welcome to Restore. We are so glad that you have chosen to join us today. Would you please rise as we worship the Lord together? I raise a hallelujah in the presence of my enemies. I raise a hallelujah louder than the unbelief. I raise a hallelujah. My weapon is a melody. I raise a hallelujah. Heaven comes to fight for me. I'm gonna sing in the middle of the storm. Louder and louder, you're gonna hear my praises roar. Up from the ashes, hope will arise. Death is defeated, the King is alive. I raise a hallelujah with everything inside of me. I raise a hallelujah. I will watch the darkness flee. I raise a hallelujah in the middle of the mystery. I raise a hallelujah. Fear you lost your hold on me. I'm gonna sing in the middle of the storm. Louder and louder, you're gonna hear my praises roar. Up from the ashes, hope will arise. Death is defeated, the King is alive. Sing a little louder.
Sing a little louder.
Sing a little louder.
Oh, sing a little louder.
Sing a little louder.
Sing a little louder.
Oh, sing a little louder.
Oh, sing a little louder.
Sing a little louder.
In the presence of my enemies.
Sing a little louder.
Oh, louder than the unbelief.
Sing a little louder.
My weapon is a melody.
Oh, sing a little louder.
Heaven comes to fight for me.
Sing a little louder.
In the presence of my enemies.
Sing a little louder.
Oh, louder than the unbelief.
Oh, sing a little louder.
My weapon is a melody.
Oh, sing a little louder.
Oh, heaven comes to fight for me.
Sing a little louder. Oh, I'm gonna sing in the middle of the storm. Louder and louder, you're gonna hear my praises roar. Up from the ashes, hope will arise. Death is defeated, the King is alive. Oh, I'm gonna sing in the middle of the storm. Louder and louder, you're gonna hear my praises roar. Up from the ashes,
the battle, you see my victory. When all I see is the mountain, you see the mountain move. And as I walk through the shadow, your love surrounds me. There's nothing to fear now, for I am safe with you. So when I fight, I'll fight on my knees with my hands lifted high. Oh God, the battle belongs to you, and every fear I lay at your feet. I'll sing through the night. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. And if you are for me, who can be against me? For Jesus, there's nothing impossible for you. When all I see are the ashes, you see the beauty. And when all I see is a cross, God, you see the empty tomb. So when I fight, I'll fight on my knees with my hands lifted high. Oh God, the battle belongs to you, and every fear I lay at your feet. I'll sing through the night. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. An almighty fortress, you go before us. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. You shine in the shadows, you win every battle. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. An almighty fortress, you go before us. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. You shine in the shadows, you win every battle. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. An almighty fortress, you go before us. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. You shine in the shadow, you win every battle. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. So when I fight, I'll fight on my knees with my hands lifted high. Oh God, the battle belongs to you, and every fear I lay at your feet. I'll sing through the night. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. All my words fall short. I got nothing new. How could I express all my gratitude? and I could sing these songs as I often do, but every song must end, and you never do. So I throw up my hands and praise you again and again, 'cause all that I have is a hallelujah, hallelujah. I know it's not much, but I'm nothing else fit for a king, except for a heart singing hallelujah, hallelujah. I've got one response, I've got just one move, with my arms stretched wide, I will worship you. So I throw up my hands and praise you again and again, 'cause all that I have is a hallelujah, hallelujah. I know it's not much, but I'm nothing else fit for a king, except for a heart singing hallelujah, hallelujah. We praise you, Lord, we praise you. So come on, my soul. So come on, my soul. Oh, don't you get shy on me. Lift up your song, 'cause you've got a lion inside of those arms. Get up and praise the Lord. So come on, my soul. Oh, don't you get shy on me. Lift up your song, 'cause you've got a lion inside of those arms. Get up and praise the Lord. So come on, my soul. Oh, don't you get shy on me. Lift up your song, 'cause you've got a lion inside of those arms. Get up and praise the Lord. Oh, we praise you, we praise you. So I throw up my hands and praise you again and again, 'cause all that I have is a hallelujah, hallelujah. I know it's not much, but I'm nothing else fit for a king, except for a heart singing hallelujah,
Lord, I come, I confess, bowing here, I find my rest, and without you, I fall apart. temptation comes my way. And when I cannot stand, I'll fall on you. Jesus, you're my hope and stay. And when I cannot stand, I'll fall on you, Lord. And Jesus, you're my hope and stay. Lord, I need you. Oh, I need you. Every hour I need you. My one defense, my righteousness. Oh God, how I need
Will you bow with me? Dear Jesus, I thank you for this day. I thank you for the freedom we have to gather and to worship you, Lord. I thank you for this space. I thank you for the gift that you have given all of us, which is another day. I just pray that you open our hearts, our minds to receive what you have to speak through Aaron today. I just pray that you bless this service, Lord, and that ultimately through all that we do today, it glorifies you. And in your name I pray. Amen.
All right. Good morning. You guys ready to hear the word of God? Yeah, there we go. I was kind of a little bit worried I wasn't going to get a response. I was like, well, why are you here? So I'm glad you're here for the right reason. All right, welcome to Worship with Restore. If you're visiting with us today, either in person or online, my name is Aaron. I'm the lead pastor of this community. And today we continue in our series through our 7 core values as a church. Thus far, we discussed how our name and our mission are one and the same, that our purpose as a church is to do what? Restore. To bring people to God through acts of service and love. And we identified our core values as follows: that we strive to be biblically based, passionate about prayer, loving servants, discipling disciples, mission-minded, authentic in our worship, and a people of celebration. We've already talked about being biblically based, how we need to continually be learning from the scriptures and putting it first. And last week we discussed how to be passionate about prayer, that we need to prioritize time talking with God. For both of these values, I provided some very tangible ways that we can apply them. And it's my intention to do the same with all the values that we will cover in this series. It's important that these values advance beyond mere belief and manifest themselves in practice. We need to put our words to work. Amen? We need to put our words to work. We need to live out the things we value if they are to be truly valued. And this is especially true when we consider the third core value, which is at the heart of our mission, and that is to be loving servants. In the Gospel of Mark, we find Jesus addressing this value after the disciples get in an argument over who they believe Jesus thinks is their favorite. They start fighting over who is most deserving of sitting next to Jesus when his kingdom comes and is established. At this point, they seem to still think that Christ's rule is going to be a very earthly one, and their intention is to seize any position of power that may come available. Like a bunch of kids fighting over who gets to ride shotgun, which is what it is. The Bible says they become indignant with one another, which causes Jesus to offer them a new perspective. He calms them down and says, you know that those who are considered rulers of the Gentiles, speaking in the secular world, lord their positions over people, and their great ones exercise authority over them. But it shall not be so among you. But whoever would be great among you must be your servant. And whoever would be first among you must be a slave to all. For even the Son of Man, speaking of himself, came not to be served, but to serve. And the greatest way he would do that is by giving his life as a ransom for many. Which is actually, I should say, an exposition on what he had previously told them when he said, many who are first in this world are going to end up last in the afterlife. For the first shall be last, and the last shall be what? First. In other words, when it comes to what God values and favors most, it's the person who exemplifies the attributes and ways of his Son. It's the one who serves others selflessly in a sacrificial way. There's a Catholic hymn from the 1960s that I think illuminates just all these claims simply, like in a simple but beautiful way. And many of you have probably heard of it, but it goes, we will work with each other, and you can say it with me. We will work with each other, we will work side by side. We will work with each other, we will work side by side. And we will guard each one's dignity and save each one's pride. And they'll know we are Christians by our love, by our love. They will know we are Christians by our love. Far too often we get caught up in all the do's and don'ts of the Bible that we lose sight of the heart that's meant to drive those do's and don'ts. Jesus said, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. What comes before keeping them? Love. If you love me, that's the intention. You will do what I have commanded you. And the greatest of these commandments, Jesus said, is for us to love God and love our neighbor, love others as ourselves. The Apostle Paul even goes as far to say regarding the latter, loving other people, he says that we're to love one another with brotherly affection. We are to love one another as family and have a desire to outdo one another in showing honor. Our actions are meant to be an expression of love, a spontaneous response in gratitude to the God who first loved us. The God who first loved us in the greatest act of sacrificial service the world has or ever will see. Ever will see. As the disciple John put it, we love, why? Because he first loved us. And he has given us this command. Anyone who loves God must also love their brother and sister. It's a love that's most definitively made known to people in our ability, listen, in our ability and willingness to serve them. All this to say at Restore, we believe being loving servants is something that we have to be known for. We have to be known for. This way of living needs to be an intrinsic part of all of us, a key feature to our identity. Because it's one of the central things Jesus came to communicate and accomplish. Listen to what is written, church. God being rich in mercy, because, I love this, because of the great love with which he loved us. God being rich in mercy because of the great love with which he loved us, even when we were dead in our trespasses, made us alive together with Christ. For it was by his grace in giving up his life that he saved us. In Christ, God took on flesh. In Christ, he stepped down from his place of honor and glory and picked up a cursed cross. He took upon himself our sin in our affliction. He died in our place. And finally, church, he rose again in the face of all impossibility just to make a way for salvation accessible, just to give you a choice. Our God is a master, but he is a master who chooses to be a loving servant. And it would seriously be foolish, and it would be short-sighted, and it is completely arrogant to think that we are meant to live our lives any differently. So the purpose of this message is to teach, church, on what it means and how we can be loving servants. My hope is that we'd all leave here inspired to fulfill our mission of restoration through acts of service and love. I want you to understand that this is the calling we've all received. Having been loved and served first, we need to honor it by doing the same for other people. Here's the thing we often forget. It's not through going to Bible college or having a bunch of scripture memorized or trying to say the right thing. The greatest way to reveal God to those who don't know him is by loving them through service. It's by loving them and serving them as Jesus did. This is my conviction. It's been my conviction this week especially, has been that in order for us to really call ourselves a Christian church, I think that we have to be a community of loving servants. If you agree with me, give me an amen. To further illustrate these things, we'll be looking at a passage found in the Gospel of John. It's a text where Jesus demonstrates what it means to love and serve a person perfectly by simply washing some feet. And so with that being said, if you have a Bible with you, I want to encourage you to go ahead and start turning to John chapter 13. If not, there are Bibles under the seats, and if you're visiting with us today and you don't have a Bible, you don't have ESV, or you like the color blue, you're welcome to take one of those with you. They are for you to take. It used to drive me crazy. I'll just get off this soapbox real quick. But when I worked at more established churches, we was like, well, you can't give them those Bibles. Those are the pew Bibles. Like, what's a pew Bible? Well, you just paid a little extra money? Like, give it away. All right? That's what they're there for. So they're not the nicest, but they got the word in it, and that's what matters. So if you don't have one, you're welcome to take one. If you want to give some to somebody else, that's great. I love having to purchase more. So you can use those. But if not, there's words always on the screen. But church, read with me what Jesus does and what John records in verses 1 through 20 of chapter 13. We're just going to start with the first verse because I'm going to give you a little bit of context here, because I know we need to do that when we just kind of jump in here. But read, church, what it says in John 13, verse 1. It's a transitional passage. And we see this. It says, now, before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart out of this world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. I absolutely love that verse. One thing that's special about the Gospel of John is that it's written after all the other ones have been written. And John intentionally writes about things. He only takes like the key events, like the crucifixion, the resurrection, the baptism, things like that. He takes for granted that you've read the other ones, and then he just gives you all these little details that the other ones didn't mention. And John really shows us the heart of Christ more than the rest of them. And what John does is he also inserts his own thoughts and interpretations as we read through it, which is super beneficial to us. And so he does what all the other gospel writers do in regards to this story. And he says, now before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart from the world, the other gospels would say something like Jesus gathered them together, right? John does this, but then he gives us the reason behind it. He says what? Having loved his own in the world, he loved them to the end. For those of you unfamiliar with the celebration of Passover, Passover is an Old Testament celebration of when God redeemed and saved Israel from their time in Egypt. Lambs were sacrificed for the families, and they took the blood from the lamb and put it over the doorposts. And so as the judgment came upon the cities in which the Egyptians and the Israelites were somewhat intermixed, those who a sacrifice had been made were spared of all judgment. Those who were not experienced a form of judgment. And so it has always been an illustration, an actual event that's meant to illustrate this idea that God, when he saves, he passes over. So he makes atonement, and he makes a way for us to not receive what is due to us. And so it's only fitting that Jesus dies, that Jesus is sacrificed on Passover, because Jesus is not just this little lamb, he is the lamb who takes not just the sin of one family, but every family who would come to him. So this is significant, right? The date and the time frame is significant. And it says Jesus knew that he was going to have to give up his life. And John said, so he got us together for this reason, to remind us of how much he loves us. Another way I wrote this out that we could say this is, right, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. John is also saying Jesus came to love unconditionally without end, and what you're about to read is a perfect illustration of how he did it. He's setting us up for the story he's about to share. And he wants you to have this key feature in mind, this concept of love that is coming from Christ. Continuing on in verse 2, it says, during supper, when the devil had already put it into the heart of Judas Iscariot, the son of Simon, to betray him, being Jesus, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was about to go back to God, rose from supper. He laid aside his outer garments, and taking a towel, tied it around his waist. Now, for some further context, Jesus is in Jerusalem now. This is the last time that Jesus enters the city of David. On his way, he does his greatest miracle, which is raising a dude who's been dead for 4 days back to life. Jesus has friends, followers of his own that are outside of the disciples. By the time he resurrects from the dead, his following is about 500 people, even though he does have this network of 12 specific disciples and the women who were also with them. But included in that outer 500, that circle, are 3 siblings, Lazarus, Mary, and Martha. And Jesus raises his friend Lazarus from the dead after he's been dead and stinky for some time. And Mary and Martha, although they're kind of mad at Jesus at first when Jesus doesn't show up to the funeral, even though he was like 5 miles away, Jesus has a point, obviously, and we don't always see it right in the moment. But Jesus comes to them and he has this conversation with Martha, and he says, I am the resurrection and the life, and the one who believes in me will live even though they die. Do you believe this? And Martha says, yes, Lord, I believe that you can do this. And upon Martha's faith, Jesus says, all right, Lazarus, come out of the grave, and he does. And so obviously this is cause for celebration. And the scripture said the Jewish leaders got really mad because Lazarus started telling everybody how Jesus rose him from the dead. Right? Who wouldn't? What's really funny is John says that they actually tried to make attempts on Lazarus' life afterwards. Like, Jesus already brought him back from the dead. You going to kill him again? Right? So obviously there's some turmoil going on, even in light of this amazing experience, this amazing miracle. And so Mary and Martha prepare a meal for Jesus and his disciples. And so Lazarus and Mary and Martha are playing hosts. And during their dinner together, the night before all of this, Mary takes a jar of very expensive oil and she breaks the seal and she uses all of it on Jesus. She pours it on his head. She wipes his hands and his feet, and she anoints him. And at this, the disciples are very confused of what they're seeing, But you see, Mary understands something that the 12 dudes didn't get yet, and that is that she understands what Jesus has been saying, and that he's going to die. And Jesus says she understands, she's anointing me, preparing me for my burial. And at this, the disciples are still in this mindset that for the Messiah to die, that is absolutely ridiculous. Like you talk to Jewish people today, that is the reason that they do not follow Jesus, is ultimately because they think it is absolutely improbable and impossible that God's Messiah would come and especially die in a cursed way. Which is like our whole thing as Christians, right? So, the disciples are confused by what they see, and Judas specifically is frustrated. The Gospel of Mark tells us that, it says, when Judas, who was one of the 12, saw that Mary poured out this oil, he was indignant. And he rebuked her for doing it. And when the disciples asked him why he was behaving such a way, he says, well, we could have given that money to the poor. And then John gives us his little footnotes, which are nice. He said, he actually only said that because he wanted a cut. John says, when we did the math of the funds afterwards, we realized that Judas had been stealing from us the entire time. Judas has a problem. He's got sin that's not dealt with, that he is not addressing or confessing or doing anything with, and he's in the presence of Jesus all the time. It's like when people say, well, if Jesus just showed up, I'd believe in him. I don't think that that's the case if you can have this guy who follows him the whole time and still doesn't get who he is. And so Judas is mad. And the next morning they get up and they go into the city, and that's when we celebrate Palm Sunday. Because we have this triumphant entry where Jesus and all the people hear what has done with Lazarus, and they are certain that this dude has to be something special, if not the Messiah, the greatest prophet who's ever lived. And so they get out and they worship him and they celebrate him, and he goes in. And what breaks my heart is at the same time, everyone else is celebrating Jesus as the Messiah. Mark tells us that Judas makes his way out of the 12 to go to the chief priests in order to betray him. And it says that when they heard that Judas was willing to betray Jesus, they were glad and promised to give him what he wanted, which was money. And it says from that point on, Judas looked for an opportunity to betray Jesus. John lets us know by the time we get to the upper room here and we get to this Last Supper that the devil has gotten a full hold of Judas. That it's beyond temptation now. He has given in to the sin and the desire, and nothing's going to change his mind. He is going to betray Jesus, and he plans on doing it tonight. John presents this, and so this, he makes us realize, is on Jesus' mind. Right? You ever think about that? It's like not only does he have to go and die in a horrific way, but that the mode in which Satan is going to do it is by one of his best friends. Somebody he invested with and lived every day with for 3 years and poured his entire life out for. It's going to be the same person who gives him away for a small sum of money. And so in the middle of this supper where John says that Jesus just stands up. Right? This is more awkward because you have to understand there's not chairs and tables like we have today. They're sitting on the floor on pillows. So Jesus just stands up, so it's even more obvious somebody's up. And he starts taking his clothes off. He takes off his outer garments, and he's just kind of in his, what would you wear essentially underneath the lower layer is a tunic, a white tunic. And so Jesus would have that on. And he walks over and he grabs the wash basin that's sitting by the door. He grabs that, grabs a towel that's there, wraps it around his waist and ties it. What Jesus is doing is funny, is it was a tradition that when you came in for a meal, you would wash your feet before entering. It's the same thing as washing your hands in our culture before you eat, right? And especially if you were being hosted by somebody else, in which Jesus is, it would be an embarrassment for you not to offer that service when people came in. So whoever's hosting has really dropped the ball here, and Jesus is going to use it to his advantage. So Jesus gets up and he essentially dresses himself like a waiter, like you would see a waiter in this culture, as a servant, because it was the lowest form of people that had to serve in that culture. It was the slaves, it was the servants, it was the poor people, it was the lower class who touched the feet. And so Jesus starts dressing himself like a slave, like a servant. And we see this in verse 5. It says, "Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and wipe them with the towel that he had wrapped around him." I hope you see the symbolism there of Jesus taking the filth of somebody else and putting it onto himself. And then it says, when he came to Simon Peter. So the disciples are like, what is Jesus doing, right? But it's always Simon who opens his mouth. And Simon says, "Lord, do you wash my feet? Like, don't touch me." Right? Like, what are you doing, Jesus? Like, you should not be the one washing my feet. And it says, Jesus answered him, "What I am doing, you do not understand now. But afterward, you will understand. Just trust me on this one." Right? You're not going to get it tonight, but you're going to get it eventually, what I'm doing. And Peter said, "You shall never wash my feet." He's doubling down, right? Jesus answered him, "If I do not wash your feet, you have no share in me." So this changes Simon's mind. Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, not my feet, but also my hands and my head." Okay, so Peter's like, all right, I definitely missed this one. But if I have to do this to be a part, to be in unison with you, Jesus, I don't just want a sprinkle of water on my feet. I want to be drenched. I want your favor to be pouring over me. So then Jesus reminds him that this has already happened in his baptism. And Jesus said to him, "The one who has bathed does not need to be washed again, except for his feet. But it is completely clean. And you are clean, but not every one of you are." So he tells Peter directly, you're still missing it. If you're thinking I'm doing this for the sake of your salvation, you already have it. But not everyone in this room with whom I am washing their feet will be saved. Verse 11, "For he knew who was to betray him." Thank you, John. "That was why he said, 'Not all of you are clean.'" Now, in the background, you have to imagine, Judas is there. Judas is hearing all of these things that Jesus is saying. He's seeing everything that Jesus is doing. And what breaks my heart even more about this passage is that we see, when we think about it in the context of not Jesus and Peter or Jesus and John or Jesus and Andrew and Nathaniel, whoever, we think of it in the context of Jesus and Judas. Jesus is continually giving Judas a chance to speak up. He is continuously giving him opportunity. Though he knows Satan already has a hold of his heart, Jesus still is reaching out to him and giving him a chance to repent. And what's more is, just as he kneels down and washes Peter's feet, he scrubs Judas's feet too. He washes his feet just like Peter, just like James, just like John and the rest of them. He treats them all exactly the same. In verse 12, we read this. "When he had washed their feet and put on his outer garment again, he then sat back down and started to eat again. And he said to them, "Do you understand what I have done for you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for so I am he." Now, this is a very important passage, especially for people who like to make the claim that Jesus never says that he's God. Because usually, up until this point, Jesus has let everybody else figure out who he is, right? Who do you say I am? And if someone's correct, he says, yeah, you're right. But he never comes out and says it. Here he does. He says, you call me your rabbi, your teacher. You call me your Lord, your king. I'm telling you now that I am he. And he quotes from Exodus chapter 3, which is when Moses asked the Lord who he is, and the Lord says, I am he. I am that which I am. So Jesus is literally accepting now, for the first time, all these things, his identity. He's saying, yes, you're right about all these things. So think about this still. Judas, still here. I am your king. I am the Messiah. I am God. And then he says, if I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, so too must you wash each other's feet. For I have given you an example that you also should do just as I have done for you. Truly, truly, I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. If you know these things, blessed are you if you do them. If you know better and do it, blessed will you be. If you know these things, blessed are you if you actually do them, Jesus said. He's essentially saying you have no excuse. If I, the Lord, wash your feet and you are not greater than me, what makes you think that you shouldn't do the same for other people? You now know better, and now you're going to be held to it. And blessed will be you if you actually do it. Jesus then says here in verse 18, for I am not speaking of all of you. I know whom I have chosen, but the scripture will be fulfilled. He, quoting from Psalm chapter 41 here, he who ate my bread has lifted his heel against me. The image here is someone you have shared your daily portion with is now stomping on your head after taking it. It's also an illustration that calls back to Genesis chapter 3, in which we're told that the son, the child of Eve, that will come to save the world, will crush the serpent with his heel, though he will make sure to bruise it. And this is the bruise, probably the worst bruise that Jesus receives in sacrificing himself, is for his own disciple and friend to take communion with him and then afterwards stomp on him. Jesus then concludes by saying, I am telling you this now before it takes place, that when it does take place, you may believe that I am he. I'm giving you an example that you're going to remember in a few days from now, and you're going to be like, he is God. Truly, truly, I say to you, whoever receives the one I send receives me, and whoever receives me receives the one who sent me. Which is to say, those who live lives in reflection of Jesus represent the Son, who is the spitting image, for lack of better words, of the Father. And taking on the role of a faithful and loving servant, by doing things like Jesus did, we reveal the true nature and character of our Creator and God. In this way, those apart from the Lord may recognize and come to know him through us. When we wash feet, we point people to Jesus who brings them to the fullness of God. In this passage, right, I said this already, but Jesus freely accepts his role as the Messiah here. It's clear here that he is God in the flesh, that he is our Lord, and that he is our master. And by choosing to deliberately put all due honor aside by washing the feet of those under him, including his betrayer, he powerfully drives home the supremacy of love through sacrificial service. He makes it known that those who claim the name Christian ought to be an example of him. For if the Lord himself, right, serves with such selflessness and humility, what makes us think that we should do anything different or anything less? As John said at the beginning, having come to love his own in the world, he loved them to the end. And he did it as a servant. I'm convinced that this is how we need to be living our lives as Christians. The question, though, is how do we actually do it? How do we actually do that, right? The first thing that came to mind was like, should we host a dinner and surprise our guests in the middle of the meal with a foot washing service? Those of you who hate feet like me, no. Probably not. That's probably not the best way to apply this text. Unlike the culture of Jesus' day, such an act isn't considered normal. Just so you know, okay? It's weird. Here, it's weird. Maybe not in other countries. Here, it's weird, okay? You ever see people do it? It's weird, okay? And let me tell you, especially if they're not Christian, it's not going to be received the same way, okay? And that's what makes this passage so difficult to apply in the present. However, church, we need to understand that washing someone's feet before dinner used to be a common practice. This isn't special, what Jesus is doing. Like, what made it special was that Jesus was the one who was doing it. What made it special was Jesus' intention behind doing it. Think about it this way. Okay, this is how you should see this. Jesus is taking an everyday task, a basic common courtesy, and he uses that to illustrate the greatest of loves. How cool is that? That's what he does. He takes a basic, everyday common courtesy and flips it to make it the most powerful illustration we have. When we consider what Jesus did from that perspective, rather than viewing it through some modern lens in which we can inappropriate Jesus' action as weird or radical, following his example quickly becomes a lot more tangible, a lot more relatable. Jesus, he takes, what he does is it's inexpressibly powerful, yes, but it's very simple what he does here. Jesus takes what he had, in this case, a basin of water and a towel, and he uses it to serve people around him. That's what he does. He takes a jar of water and a towel and scrubs some feet. That's it. And you know what? He doesn't show favoritism. He doesn't do it out of obligation. He does it willingly and hopes to minister to all of them. He doesn't care if they're the feet of a friend or a foe. All Jesus seems to see here is feet that need to be washed, so he washes them. He's the master who came to serve, to give his life as a ransom, and the only thing, hear me when I say this, the only thing that he asks in return for services rendered is for us to do the same for somebody else. He actually doesn't get anything back. He doesn't want anything back. It's a process I believe starts from within the church that should overflow to the point that it's impossible for it to not affect others outside of it. What I mean by this, church, is that we need to make sure that we're learning to love and serve one another first. Right? You ever heard them say before? Well, you can't love somebody unless you love yourself, right? You can only love somebody as much as you understand what love is. That's a fact. It's the same thing when we're talking about the church. Like, how can we love people outside the church if we can't love those within it? The early church was so good at serving each other, the evangelist Luke says with confidence, there were no needy people among them. What? Could you imagine that? That sounds too good to be true. Sounds like socialism to me, right? Whatever. Socialism works if everyone actually was a good person. It doesn't work because people are terrible. Okay? There's your politics for the day. All right? But in this context, it works. Because they put each other first. They honor one another. They don't take advantage of one another. They come together and they give to one another. It says whatever they had in excess, they gave away and sold, and whoever was least among them, they raised up so that they were on a level playing field. Church, Luke says there was no needy person in the church. How many churches do you think can say that today? Do you think we can say that today? The answer is not many, if any. And unfortunately, no, we can't say that. Whenever and wherever we're together, we're supposed to be creating a space for people to be cared for people to be accepted, and for people to be loved. I'm so baffled sometimes by our short-sightedness. Like, what short-sightedness, like, what must take place when we fail to see those who are in need around us? What selfishness must exist when we have the ability, but not the willingness, to do what Christ first did for us? We cannot and should not expect anyone to want to join the family of God when we neglect and mistreat its members. As John said later, if anyone has material possessions and sees a brother or sister in need, let him question if he's going to use it on drugs or not. Let him judge the person with the cardboard sign. Let him think whether or not he should say yes or no. Is that what it says? No, it doesn't, church. So stop it. It is not up to you what they do with it. And it does not matter. It is up to you to help them. And what they do with it is between them and God. You do what you're called to do and serve, right? John says, if anyone then knows the good, right? I'm sorry, I'm skipping ahead. If anyone has material possessions and sees a brother or sister in need, but here's the key, but has no pity on them, they don't care, how can the love of God be in that person? James, the brother of Jesus, goes as far to say, suppose a brother or sister is without clothes and daily food. If any one of you says to them, go in peace, keep warm, and be well fed, but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it? In another place, he says, if anyone then knows the good they ought to do and doesn't do it, which is what Jesus is saying here. If anyone knows the good they ought to do and doesn't do it, it is, guess what? Sin for them. The church's greatest sin is one that it doesn't do. The church's greatest sin is that of omission. It's of seeing a need, having the ability to do something about it, and not. Because here's the thing, church, we don't like to think about it this way, but when we get to heaven, we are going to have to answer for not just the things that we did, not just the things that we didn't do, or not just the things that we did wrong, I'm getting ahead of myself, but the things that we didn't do. So we're going to have to say, this is what I did right, this is what I did wrong, and this is what I didn't do. What I mean by all this is that we often see dirty feet around us, right? In a metaphorical sense, we see dirty feet around us, needs that we can meet, but refuse for any number of stupid reasons. We refuse to get up like Jesus and do anything about it. How easy would it have been for Jesus to finish the rest of that meal and not get up? No one would have expected him to do anything. He's Jesus. The thing is, I think so often we just get complacent. Like, it's not that any one of the disciples were like unwilling to wash Jesus' feet or each other's feet. They just weren't paying attention. And that is more convicting to me, because the need was there right in front of them as they sit crisscross applesauce, and none of them paid attention. It was no Da Vinci scene where everyone's on one side, they're sitting across from each other. It's obvious, we're all on the floor on pillows. There's dirty feet across from your plate, and someone who don't like feet is going to notice that. But apparently it's not that big of a deal to them. I'm still trying to figure that out. Okay. The point is, we got to open our eyes. We got to open our eyes. We got to see, church, that this room is filled with people who are in need of a loving servant who's willing to do something about that need. And what's cool about Jesus' example is that he teaches us that it can be pretty much done any way. It can be done with whatever we have. Whatever we have to use, we're supposed to use it. As the Bible teaches us, to edify the body as a whole. Like, God didn't give you gifts just for you. He gave them to edify the body. So that's the first step of our application that I want you to take to heart this morning, church. Be looking for opportunity to love and serve each other, and then actually do it. Because that's what Jesus said, right? Blessed are those who know better and then do it. So do it. We need to take to heart what the book of Hebrews says, and that is we need to spur on one another. I like that illustration because it's like kicking a horse, right? Spur on. Doesn't feel good in the moment, always, but it gets us moving, right? Spur one another on for our own benefit. He says, for love, that we may love and conduct good works. And I think in this way we will wash each other's feet. We need to let love be what we're known for. And when we do with each other, that's going to pour out into all the other areas of our lives. Because here's the thing, we can't just stop with each other. And Jesus didn't expect us to do that. What did Jesus do? Jesus, right, he served in-house with the 12 first, but then he told them to do it themselves with other people. What Jesus did in-house was done so that it would eventually inspire them to go out and do the same. Jesus has told us already, right, that we are the light of the world, that he's established us as a city on a hill that can't be hidden. People should know us by our love, and not just our love for one another, but our love for everyone. Jesus left us without excuse, and here's the thing, we cannot make any excuse in the fact that he washed Judas's feet. I mean, think about it. Like, really think about the fact that Jesus knew while he was doing that. Jesus knew. He knew as soon as he had finished wiping Judas's feet clean, that he was about to get up and dirty them again. And yet, he continued to take Judas's feet upon himself just the same. And here's the thing, I'm sure that the same care he used to scrub Peter's feet was taken with Judas's. As he was able, what he had, he lovingly served everyone, and we need to understand the same is expected of us, anyone who calls himself a Christian. When Judgment Day comes, and we stand before the throne, there will only be one set of questions that's actually going to matter. According to Matthew 25, Jesus will take all those who claim allegiance to him. Matthew 25 is not about those who do not have faith. It's about people who believe Jesus is the Messiah. Jesus is going to take all those who claimed him in this life, and Before they enter the next, he's going to ask them, when my people were hungry, did you give them anything to eat? When they were thirsty, did you give them something to drink? When they were strangers, did you give them a place to stay? When they needed clothes, did you cover them? When they were sick, did you look after them? And when they were in trouble, did you go visit them? Church, Jesus makes it clear that whatever we do or not do for the least of these, we do and do not do for him. Within every person, there exists the image of God. And when we neglect and mistreat others, we neglect and mistreat the God who made them. In different ways, Jesus has knelt down before all of us. Amen? By the pouring out of his blood, we've all been washed clean. Yet too often we go out like Judas and dishonor it and our failure to do the same for other people. The way we apply these things may look different from person to person, and it probably should. But the message remains the same in that we have been called to be loving servants. Church, we say we're here to restore, right? We've been called to bring people to God. The only way that that's going to happen is through acts of service and love. It's the mission that we need to take more seriously. So my challenge as we leave today and move on in our service, is that I want us to do what Jesus did, and I want us to go wash some feet this week. However that looks for each one of you. I want you to consider what you have, what it is that you can give. And it can be the most simplest thing ever. But when doing it, I want you to recognize who it's reflecting. People are going to know who Jesus is by our love, right? By the way we treat them. So let's use what we have to love and serve. Let's be a Christian church, all right? Let's be a community of loving servants. Would you bow with me? Holy and gracious Father, we come to you today and we thank you for this place that you have blessed us with. As Taylor said earlier, we thank you, God, that you have given us the freedom to gather here, that we can speak your word and fellowship with one another without any fear. What a tremendous blessing that we take for granted. Lord Jesus, you are with us always. You promise that you are with us always to the very end of the age. Your Holy Spirit is active. He is present. And so often we get distracted by all the other things going on that we fail to see the needs that are staring us in the face. Lord, I just ask that you would humble us and that you would open our eyes this week so that we be able to see those things. And God, if it's something that you have equipped us to handle right then, I pray that we do not question it, that we just help. And God, if asked why, help us to have the confidence to say you. You bless us that we may bless other people, God. And you give us opportunities to represent you, to be your ambassadors in this world. Help us to do so, Lord. If anyone is here and they didn't know better before, we know better now. So give us the strength, give us the humility, give us the eyes to see the needs and the confidence to do what we can to help. Lord, if anybody here is faced with something that is simply too much for them to handle, I pray that they reach out to the church so that we can see what we can do collectively and together. Help us to care for one another, like Paul says, and to treat each other with brotherly affection. And all these things, Jesus, we thank you for your example that you set eternally for us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
As we come into this time of communion, I just thought of a couple things as Aaron was talking. Not only do we need to be loving servants to the church first, but the community as a whole, even the people that don't go to church, that don't believe in God, we still have to show them love and give them what they need. And I think Restore is pretty good about reaching out to the community and meeting the needs, and it doesn't always get the recognition from the community, but it's recognized by God, and that's something that you could tell yourself, like, why am I doing this? I'm not doing it to be put in the newspaper or on the news or on the internet. I'm doing it to glorify God. So if there's something on your heart that you notice that there's a need for, please bring it up to anyone so we can help with that. And it's important to remember the ultimate sacrifice that God has done for us. So during this time of communion, I just ask that you reflect on what God has done for you in your life and how you can turn that around and do something for others. Will you bow with me? Oh, holy and gracious God, you have given us so much hope and so much love and so much mercy and so much grace that our minds can't even fathom. And we come to you today to ask that we be loving servants to everyone we encounter in our daily lives. As Jesus washed the feet of his disciples, even the one who betrayed him, I ask that you equipped us all to wash the feet of those who may have betrayed us at some point. And as we take these elements today, I ask that you just put it on our hearts of how we can continue to do what you have called us to. And it's in your holy and gracious name I pray all these things. Amen. Here at Restore, we practice open communion. We have a lot of members from different backgrounds, and we ask that you take communion in the way that you see fit. You may rise and take the elements.
All right. Well, as we conclude service, we're just going to talk about, as always, our upcoming announcements. I do want to say really quick, I think we ran out of communion today, so if you did not get an opportunity to take communion and would still like to, Tanner is preparing some extra communion as we speak, so it will be in the back. So please feel free to take that time and space to take communion as a form of worship and then pray. I just don't want you to leave without having the opportunity to do that every week. It's an important part of our service, and we want everyone to be able to participate in that if they so choose. So our upcoming announcements, care ministry is something that we talked a lot about at the annual meeting, which I think was last week, but feels like a lifetime ago. So care ministry is something that we're starting. It's just a more formal form of some ministries that we've already been participating in, but this is an opportunity for people who really have hearts for caring for the sick, or people who are shut-ins or elderly at hospitals, or whatever that looks like, meal trains for people who need it. The care ministry is a team that we're sort of forming this year to put more structure around that and to be able to meet those needs without having to reach out to Aaron or Josiah or Allison. There'd be a ministry team in place to help with those. So if this is something that you're interested in, even if you're not able or interested in serving on the care ministry team in a formal role, but this is something that you'd be interested in just learning about for situations that arise in your own life, you're more than welcome to attend the care ministry trainings. So Aaron will be leading 2 sessions. So it starts this Thursday, February 8th, and will be next Thursday as well, February 15th at 7 p.m. at Aaron and I's house here in Highland. So if this is something that interests you or you want some more information about that, I'd talk to Aaron or Josiah. They can both help with those items, but if you are interested in this, please feel free to come join us. Youth Sunday classes are something that we are going to start relaunching. So the first and third Sundays of every month, starting February 18th, we will offer an option for youth to have like a separate class. So like during the same time that like children's church is going on and nursery, after worship, there'll be an opportunity for any like youth-aged kids. So anyone in junior high or high school, grades 6 through 12, can go in the back after worship. And then Katie will be heading up our youth ministry coming into this new year. So please spend time encouraging Katie. But if any of you have youth-age kids or just you are a youth-aged person and want to bring a friend, we just want to encourage you to take advantage of this. This is just to really help you as you grow and mature as a Christian. And I think that's all I want to say about that. So let's just move on. If you have any questions, talk to Katie. Connect groups are also going to be launching again. So these next 2 weeks, we'll be doing care ministry trainings. And then the week after, so February 19th, we will start our regularly scheduled Connect group season for the spring. Connect groups are just small group opportunities throughout the week to connect with one another and with God outside of normal Sunday worship. So this is just an opportunity. Depending on what it looks like, we all come together, just small group settings, study together, study scripture, learn the word, fellowship together, encourage each other in growth. So these are good opportunities to do that. I don't think we have formal schedules lined up yet. I think Josiah is still considering topics. I believe Aaron's will continue to be on Wednesday evenings, and he is going to, his topic is the prophets and prophecies. So we'll be studying some like major and minor prophets throughout the Bible. And it's also a good way for us to learn how to read that kind of scripture. So TBD, keep this on your calendar, coming up. Holly's House of Hope Trivia Night. Sorry, I went too fast. We talked about this a couple weeks ago, and we really just felt like the March date that we had originally had set was too quick for us to effectively do a good job in preparing the trivia night. And the Weinheimer was not available at that time, so there was location constraints, all that to say. We talked to Holly's House of Hope, and they've agreed to push back to Friday, May 3rd. So it'll just be that first weekend in May, that first Friday. We'll be hosting here at the Weinheimer a trivia night for them. This is something that the missions and outreach team will oversee, but if this is something that you specifically want to help with, I typically have a large group of volunteers that either help like making questions or hear the night of or judging or greeting at the door or whatever that might look like. This is a great opportunity for us to help an organization that we're already financially supporting, but just to encourage and support them further. And so if this is something you want to volunteer with, please talk to me. And if this is something that you want to participate in, please mark your calendar and grab a group of your friends or family or multiple groups of family and friends and plan to grab a table for trivia night. So this is really just like a mark your calendar. We'll start doing planning for volunteer stuff this upcoming month. So I'm just getting that on your radar. Let me know if you'd like to participate in that if you have not already like signed up on a sign-up sheet. Okay, I think this is my last one. The volunteer fair. So we've had a lot of administrative things going on, and we're concluding our fun January of administration by moving into the volunteer fair. So as you can see, there are lots of tables set up in the back. So as soon as I conclude announcements, everyone's gonna like go to their battle stations, and each ministry like team leader or somebody who's helped out with this ministry will be at the table. And this is a good opportunity for you if you're not already volunteering, or maybe you are volunteering somewhere, but you're curious about other ministries or just want to get to know them better, to go ask questions, to go find out what a role on their team might look like, how you can better volunteer in those capacities. I forgot first impressions on my slide, but we have all of those ministries that will be in the back: children's and nursery, women's and men's, worship team and tech team, care ministry, first impressions, mission outreach, prayer team, and set up teardown. Everybody will have a representative back there, and that will be there this Sunday and next Sunday as well. So if you don't have an opportunity this week and you want to stick around next week to do that, that's great. But we'll be back there for about 15 minutes just after service concludes. Come ask questions, come get to know the different ministry teams, and figure out where you can get plugged in this year if you're not already serving. I do want to say before we leave this, we do have a couple like more critical roles. This isn't to say that like you shouldn't, search and find where you feel like God's calling you to serve, but we especially need help in the tech section, so like live stream specifically or like slides. So if either of those interests you, I would encourage you to talk to Tanner. He'll be back in the back about those, or Tanner or Taylor, about those two items. And again, I still want you to explore and find out where God's calling you to, but if those are things that are on your heart, those are things where we definitely have needs at right now. Okay. I believe that is all the official announcements I have for you. As always, our prayer station is open. Connie and Mike are over there today, and this is just a way for us to be intentional about prayer. So if you have something that stuck out to you during the service that you want to pray about, or just something going on in your lives that you want to communicate to us, you can always grab one of us after service. But the prayer team is an intentional way of doing that. We all have stuff going on, praises or prayer requests that need shared, that should be shared with one another so that we can pray over you. So the prayer team prays over all of these requests all week. You can also always write a prayer request on one of the index cards and pin it up to the board, and just know that the prayer team is praying over that, and we'll kind of check in with you on that as well. So with that being said, I hope you guys have a great week. Pray over the prayer team or join us at the volunteer fair after service. But if not, I will see you guys next week.